Hello and welcome to the Slam. I look very excited. My name is Jim Smallman. We're here every week for wrestling chat and gossip and what have you. But this week is a special edition where in the studio is, well, possibly the biggest hero in my life, the wonderful Mr. Mick Foley. I'm going to applaud you, sir.
Well, I appreciate that, and I remember meeting Ray Davies of the Kinks and told him I was a huge fan, and I said, I know a lot of people can say that, but I have proof, and I showed him a page out of Have a Nice Day. A lot of people could say they're big fans of mine, but you have proof.
Yeah, I do have you tattooed on me.
That's a commitment.
Well, it is, and probably one that slightly frightens you. The thing is, though, after doing your comedy shows with you, which is obviously why you're over here doing stand-up, after doing a couple of shows with you this weekend, and then your fans, who are just the nicest people, have been sending me messages on Twitter, but I've been getting messages from other Mick Foley fans who've got tattoos.
No kidding.
Yeah, so most of them have got the sort of Have a Nice Day smiley face, but a few of them have got your signature and stuff like that.
See, with the face, you don't have the option they do. If it's a smiley face or whatever, then as years go by and they realize the magnitude of that error.
It's not an error. Whenever I get a tattoo, my little girl, who's 8, will ask me who the tattoo is and what the significance is of it. So I've said to her, well, you know Daddy likes wrestling, and she's gone, yeah. And I said, well, this is my favourite wrestler of all time, and he's written books that are important to me. And she went, oh, okay. So she's now seen pictures and stuff of you, and I've said, when you're a little bit older, you're allowed to watch Hell in a Cell, but not before, because you're still only 8. Now, you're over here doing stand-up.
Yes.
You've done a few shows so far. I mean, we've been in London all weekend, haven't you?
Right.
And it's Monday today. You're off to Cardiff.
Yes, we've done 4 shows. 1 in Glasgow, 3 in London. Now we're off to Cardiff. This is the question that I want to answer. The premise of the tour is, can one man do 11 shows in 11 days in 5 countries with 1 carry-on bag of clothing?
And the answer would be,
if you're Mick Foley, yes, yes, you can.
Well, you are the most frugal man in
that's been exaggerated, and I do things occasionally to cling on to that reputation. I'm proud of it.
Yeah, well, it's fine. I mean, well, I think the way to look at it is, I mean, you're not. I suppose when you started wrestling, did you expect that you would have another career when you got to your age now? Do you expect you'd have a career as a writer and a comedian?
No, and I didn't expect if I did have good years, I didn't expect them to be nearly as good as they turned out to be. My wife and I were reminiscing a few days ago, right before I left, about a contract I signed with WWE in 1997, and it called for like a graduation in salary every year, and then she and I went to dinner, and we just thought if we could just make it to that 4th year, that 4th year, and it was a contract that it was a minimum guarantee, and luckily the WWE just took off, and I never even had to worry about that minimum because we always greatly out-earned it. But we were just like, if we had that 1 year, and that was we were basing on trying to save as much money as we possibly could and cling on to it. And then the writing was a door that opened up, and through the writing really came the speaking at colleges, and through the speaking at colleges came the opportunity to do some stand-up. Yeah,
and I think the thing is as well, having read Have a Nice Day, when it was, I remember being in America when it was first published, and going to a Barnes & Noble where I'd reserved it from this country because we were going to have to wait too long for it to be released there. And I bought the hard copy of it, and I was on holiday with my family in Florida and read all the way through it. And I remember one of the things that really astonished me is I've been a wrestling fan since I was really, really little. I'm 33 now, and I remember reading that and thinking, I can't believe he didn't earn that much money up until a certain point. Yeah. Because I think when we watch wrestling as fans, we sit there. I mean, we're in an era now where we're a little bit smarter as fans, and the older you get, the more you read on the internet, the more you start thinking, right, it isn't necessarily the most financially rewarding industry in the world. But you really, I suppose, even when you first signed with the WWE, you wouldn't have necessarily expected things to take off that massively, would you?
No, because I never expected it. People ask me in the Q&A once in a while, who was the best opponent I ever had, or what were the best matches. And I always make sure I bring up Stone Cold Steve Austin's name, and I point to the times I wrestled him as Mankind. He was Stone Cold, I was Mankind. He was the good guy, I was the bad guy. And I had never even dreamt that that wrestling or sports entertainment could be so popular, and that someone within the industry could be so popular. Although a good argument can be made that Hogan was like Stone Cold was in the in the mid '80s. Hogan was at that level, certainly, but not in my era. And all of a sudden, I'm wrestling this guy, and the reactions are so much bigger than I'd ever received. That it kind of created the false perception in my mind that I was really, really good. Like, listen to these reactions, I'm really good. But yeah, things took off and they got bigger than we would have dreamed, but that brings along its own hurdles. Yeah. Hurdles with it.
Well, I think certainly from a gratitude point of view, I mean, obviously I met you when you did your tour last year, and you've always seemed very grateful for everything that's come your way, which is a very sort of refrishing standpoint to have, because there's plenty of people who just go, oh, well, it's just what I expect to happen.
Yeah.
But I mean, with you coming from the background that you came from, especially wrestling in the territories in sort of the late 80s, early 90s, and then going to Japan and going through all the stuff that you went through, particularly torturous stuff that you went through in Japan.
Oh, sure, yeah.
For not a load of money.
No.
Was there a point where you always thought, well, this is how it's always going to be, and I'm going to do it? Did you have like an exit plan for wrestling if you didn't get a big payday?
Well, I was smart enough to set a timetable for myself that if I wasn't making a pretty good living, by the time I was 26, that I'd have to fold up the tent and admit that it wasn't going to happen, and maybe wrestle on the side. And some of the guys who are the happiest are the ones who do know their role, who are realistic with their ambitions, and don't let the dream kind of sabotage their real life. But I remember when I was in ECW and I was wrestling over in Japan and really suffering from my art. That I was actually planning on trying to work out something with WCW and just say, hey, maybe I could be on every Monday night. Like, I'd be a good guy to make some of your top stars look good. And I was trying to piece together. No, first of all, that probably wouldn't have worked with Paul Heyman and Eric Bischoff. I probably couldn't have done it both. But at that time, I was like, between the 12 tours or 10 tours I'm doing in Japan and the ECW and one night a week, like, that would be a pretty good living. Yeah. And I was still at that point in 1995 looking to piece together a good living. And this was done at a time when, I was coming home pretty regularly, battered, beaten and stitched.
Well, yeah. I do love the story about you you sitting in first class at an aeroplane and the smell of burning.
Oh, because I was bumped up because I was always sitting in this is where you exaggerate. I don't even know if I actually sat in 26C, ever. But that's become, in my mind, 26C is symbolic of where I was sitting. And although I may have not have been sitting near the crapper on that many flights, 26C by the crapper was indicative of flying coach, 14 hours to Japan. And on that one occasion, it was after the Kawasaki Dream, which is now known as the King of the Deathmatch tournament. I was just so beaten up. I mean, I had 42 stitches in 6 different places. I don't mean 6 times 42, but there was 7 here, there was 6 here, there was 8, there was 14 behind my good ear, and I was just a mess. My eye was all black and blue, and when I was treated at the hospital, the last thing we were even thinking of was that I had some pretty bad burns on my arm, 2nd degree. They healed up pretty good. Because it hurt, but it looked exactly like the skin underneath it. It wasn't until the next day the skin started turning color and getting, crispy, and it was brown, and they bumped me up just out of sympathy. And because I had the stitches in my hair and they've been considered in my head, I couldn't take a shower. So you've got that burnt hair, flesh, and blood smell. And so that woman next to me, I thought she got up to take a bathroom break, and about an hour later, like I turned around and I was like, "Where's that lady?" And I looked by, and she was like at 26C by the crapper. Except I remember she had a window seat, and she was just like huddled up there. And in my mind, she was like shaking and giving thanks that she didn't have to be sitting next to a guy like me. And I still had that kind of rebellious streak, and my inner reaction was, yes. Like, this woman willingly sat in 26C by the crapper to get away from me. And it goes back to what I said in Have a Nice Day, that I had that feeling when I used to be able to do moves and get a reaction out of people, especially women, that if I couldn't attract people, I could disgust them.
Yeah.
And one reaction was just as good as the other for me.
Yeah. Do you think there's a parallel with the reaction that you get from? I mean, I can only speak from someone who's done comedy. I would love to wrestle because it's something I've always wanted to do. But I think there's definitely a parallel between getting the reaction from wrestling and comedy, isn't it? And do you get a similar sort of buzz from that now?
To me, it's the closest parallel there can be. I can't think of another business as similar to pro wrestling as stand-up comedy, especially in the sense that, I mean, I am starting out. I mean, I'm afforded some of the trappings, you know, like I kind of get to cut towards the front of the line, you know. But what I like is the fact that we've got great. I feel funny even saying support acts, because to have you and Brendan Burns on the same night, and to have Chris Brooker as a compere, and then it's like, and here's your headliner who has 27 shows to his credit. You know, I am able to jump to the front of the line, but it's the same in the sense that every show is different. You know, you try to learn from your mistakes. You know, I sit down and I try to analyze it and think about it in the same way that I used to with pro wrestling. And you wonder why something that worked so well one night doesn't work the next night, whether it was you, the delivery, the timing, or whether it was them. Yeah. And I think in the same way that now it's a little different in wrestling, because WWE is the primary national company and international. I'm proud, you know, I'm glad to say that TNA is doing well internationally, and they've got their
especially market.
Here. Here and in India, and they've got their market too. But I'm saying primarily, you know, when you say pro wrestling, people in the States think of WWE, and because it's the same product, the reactions are going to be kind of the same across the country and in the world. Of course, in the northeast part of the United States, they're tougher, you know, they're tougher to please. They like the bad guys a little more, but it's not that same. It's not quite the same as going from club to club, where each club has its own atmosphere, and that on any given night you can go out there and kill on the early show, and go out there and be using some of the same material. I pride myself on mixing it up a lot, but
well, that's the thing. You've got a lot of for someone. I know you say, "Well, I haven't been doing it for very long," but you've got to bear in mind, as a comedian, you know, we work really hard to get to the point where after a few years we've got an hour that we can take to festivals and stuff like that. But you're already hitting the first time I worked with you, I think you did about an hour and 40 minutes on stage, including a Q&A, and the audience was no one was getting up and going. Everyone was sitting there thinking, "I can't even go to the toilet, because if I do, I'm going to miss something cool." You know,
that was seriously, and I said this in Twitter, and you know, once you put it in print, it's true, but I'll share it with the audience here too. Is after that show with you and Brendan, we went out to eat, and that was seriously the best time I've had.
It was the happiest I've been like forever.
It's crazy, because we not only did you guys both go out and do killer sets, but the audience was really responsive. And then coming back and getting the feedback from both of you and from Chris, and we went out and then we had the great dinner with Harry.
Harry, the crazy man in the Chinese restaurant who looked like he wrestled for all Japan. Oh, I love that when you walked in, because we rang ahead and you walked into a Chinese restaurant and all of a sudden everyone who worked in there was like, "We now need to have our photograph taken with this man." It's the closest I've ever felt to being in an entourage. So I genuinely
it was really a great night. And then Saturday night, coming off the great show, the early show, then I do Saturday, and it's like, wow, that audience was tougher. They weren't as responsive. They a little more fueled by alcohol, which instead of encouraging them to cheer meant they didn't get some of the subtleties. Yeah. And it was like, man, what a downer. And luckily, I had a Tori Amos fan in the second row who had met me in Glasgow, and so she and her boyfriend came back after the show. Boyfriend was a huge wrestling fan, but we talked about Tori Amos and her unique way to touch people's lives, and I left like, okay, you know, going out there and I wouldn't say I bombed by any means, but it wasn't quite as fulfilling. You get that expectation. That night with me, you, and Brendan and Chris, the Chinese restaurant. Now that's the standard, and now you have to try to live up to that in the same way that maybe like a match I had against Sting in 1992 was the standard I tried to live up to, and then it was Mind Games at 1996 that I tried to live up to, and that you keep. But if you don't keep pushing the bar, you know, I don't think either business does well in drawing people who accept mediocrity.
You've got to keep, and that's the thing. I mean, it's exactly the same. It's just all you've done is you've transferred from getting thrown off cages for standing there and bearing your soul in front of an audience, which is... listen, we've got to go for a quick break. We'll be back in 2 minutes. What you've been doing, I've got an iPad here. We've been asking for your questions being sent to me for Mick on Twitter. I've got a load of them here. We will ask Mick some questions in a couple of minutes. We'll see you in 2. Hello there, welcome back to part 2 of The Slam. I'm your host, Jim Smallman. We're here every week talking wrestling, but this week we've got our special guest in the studio is none other than Mick Foley, the hardcore legend. I'm so excited. And I've got to hang out with you for most of the weekend, so I'm already, it doesn't get any better than this for me.
But now, we have the same challenge here today that I do when I go on comedy, is trying to find the right mixture of comedy, wrestling, wrestling comedy, and world events that then I can jump off of and extend into wrestling. And we may have talked too much non-wrestling.
Well, we've got a lot of wrestling related questions. Last week I asked on Twitter, my Twitter handle if you want to follow me is @JimSmallman. We ask a wrestling question every week. Last week's big question was, have you got anything you'd like to ask Mr. Foley? So we've got a load of questions. Apologies, we got so many questions. I can't mention you all by name, but thank you all for getting in touch and giving us your questions. So couple of quick ones from the list. This is a non-wrestling one, but I love it, so it has to be the one I kick off with. What ringtone do you have on your phone?
I am so technologically behind the times that I don't even know how to put a ringtone, and so behind the times that I forgot to call a week ahead and get an international phone. So once again, just like November, you think I would have learned my lesson. I'm without a phone.
Really?
For 2 weeks. And
actually, yeah, because I saw you using other people's phones to check your emails and stuff like that.
Yeah, I don't. I just have my wife emailing me. I don't even know how to Skype. When I'm like, we should learn how to Skype.
You can chat to us on the Slam every week.
Maybe I could. Yeah. But no, I don't have a ringtone. I'm sorry about that.
Oh,
and sometimes I go days without realizing it's on vibrate, and I'm not actually getting my phone messages. So.
I like the idea. I think the reason the person asked this was I think they like the idea of you having your own theme music as your ringtone. Which I have to add, out of all the theme musics you ever had, what was your favourite of all time?
Well, I really enjoyed the one that most people associate with me. One of the problems I faced, and we call them hurdles, I call them hurdles, is that when I became very popular in WWE as a babyface or good guy character as Mankind, I still had this slow, disturbing entrance music
with the two different. So it was
they stopped playing the outro music. The slow piano music was supposed to mean that I was finally at peace after I had injured somebody. That was the one thing I did lift from Silence of the Lambs.
But that was a really good idea though, because at the time it really did, it added another dimension to
and until the day I went out and had my first match, I'd thrown a bunch of things their way. I didn't like the name they had for me. I was like, what about Mankind?
Was it Mason the
Mutilator
originally?
And so I suggested Mankind the Mutilator. I suggested having different finishing and different entrance and exit music, and I went out for my first match and it was Mankind, no Mutilator, just Mankind. And then when I finished the match, they had that gentle piano music, and I thought, wow, they went for my ideas. And I think that was one of the pluses I had, was that I got into WWE. I already had almost 12 years in the business, so I wasn't shy about speaking up. And there are people out there who don't like me in the fan world or whatever, because I think some guys come across as looking and feeling like they're self-important. But the truth is, if you walk around any business and just say, I'm willing to take what you give me, you don't get very far. So it was brought up by a journalist that Bret Hart gets the same rap sometimes, but if he wasn't that way, no one would be talking about Bret the Hitman Hart right now, because he was a guy who probably would have been content to be in the middle of the card. So it's that kind of belief in yourself, and sometimes it can border on delusion.
But also as well, it's not like by the time you got to WWE in '97, it wasn't like you'd not done the rounds and been around.
Well, I had,
and you were at main event level in WCW.
Yes.
So, you know, it's not like you didn't have the sort of the chops to back it up, really, was it?
Well, I had to keep telling myself on the flight there for my first show, I was like, wait a second, I've worked with a lot of these guys. I'm respected by a lot of these guys. But then you show up and you see The Undertaker and Bret Hart in the main event, and you're like, what am I doing here? What am I doing? You know, it is overwhelming, and some guys just kind of lose their way. And, you know, physically, they get in that ring, which is only 2 feet larger, but seems like an eternity. I swear, when I was wrestling Jake Roberts in one of my first few matches in WWE, and it felt like I was running across a desert. You know,
well, because the WWE ring is massive.
Yeah,
isn't it? Having been to independent shows in this country, and it's often 16 by 16, and the WWE ring's 20
by 20. Yeah. And since WWE is kind of like the standard bearer, that becomes normal. And this is what we're talking about when it comes. I compared to what I was saying with, here's your great show. Yeah. But now this becomes what a show should be.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Now WWE ring is bigger than any other ring, but because that's what most people know of as a wrestling ring, everything else looks smaller.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the 16 by 16s, and I've been in some 14 by 14s, they just look like children's toys, you know, compared to the big one. But you get out there, and the ring is made out of ropes. You know, it's the only rings that are made, you know, have real ropes instead of cables with a coating. Far more fans than most guys, even really good wrestlers, are used to seeing. And that big ring, and knowing that the guy behind the curtain is the one guy that can give you the yes or no, and that it doesn't matter what you've done anywhere else until you can impress that guy, you're not going to get past a certain level.
Yeah, I do find the transition from one to another just fascinating. I'm going to ask you a question about the current WWE roster.
Okay.
Obviously, because you were involved at the Royal Rumble. I mean, firstly, it's a question a lot of people have asked on Twitter. What made you want to work the Royal Rumble? I mean, I was really pleased because having seen you in November and then seeing you when I was watching the Rumble, seeing you coming out, and I thought, you know, Mick looks in good shape because I know you'd been training for it and things like that.
Well, out of respect for the studio, I was actually taking a drink of water, and you gave me the ultimate spit take moment, and I couldn't do it.
You put work in to get ready to do the Rumble, didn't you?
Minimal. This is, I go back when I wrote Countdown to Lockdown. I talked about going and training, and I'd been exacerbating injuries when I would work hard, because I would still get into that thing where training is suffering in my mind. It was never fun. Something I did with a goal, and it was always, I was like the woman who gives up smoking in order to have a baby and can't wait to have that cigarette, you know, when she's done. I mean, I would train, and I would get in pretty good cardiovascular shape, you know, and I'd be able to go toe to toe for a while with, you know, much better athletes. But I was like, I can't wait to have that double cheeseburger, you know, when I'm done with this. But I started getting injured when I was training, and including a really bad back injury that was, you know, just hideous. And to me, that was God's way of telling me that I wasn't supposed to train that hard for matches.
Yeah, that seems fair enough.
Even if I was wrestling Kurt Angle. And so I went to the gym. I headed out. I told my daughter, okay, goodbye. And she said, okay, Dad, I love you. My daughter always tells me she loves me. And I got back like 40 minutes later, and she said, you went to the gym and now you're back? And I was like, thinking, do I tell her I also worked a visit to the bank into that 40-minute trip? Like, I didn't really work
That's multitasking.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, did you? Because Diamond Dallas Page has got his whole yoga thing. Have you?
I'm working on it. You know, I just had a talk, and I'm going to get back to that Rumble question. I swear, I'm not politically evading it. And I was like, Dallas, you know, bro. No, he calls me bro. I was like, honestly, I was watching the DVDs, and like, I can't do that. Like, I can't stand on one leg anymore. Bro, look, that's why we have, you know, he has a guy that does it with him who kind of. Who does it in an adaptive way, including like an injured service member who's missing a limb. And he's like, get your heart rate monitor. Here's the one you do first. And the thing about Dallas, he really wants other people to feel better. Like, he wants to take these things that he's learned.
He's essentially doing his WWE gimmick. but as in real life now,
but the thing about Dallas is he's not. He never was a gimmick. Even when he was in WCW and he was the guy coming out of the crowd, I mean, that is who Dallas is.
Yeah.
When he was in a WWE, maybe within, that's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
It was him slightly amplified. But
well, they're the best gimmicks, though, aren't they?
They're the best gimmicks.
Yeah.
Abdullah the Butcher saw Dallas about a week after he debuted as a wrestler, a guy who decides that he's going to turn from being, sorry, DDP, a very average manager, really cliche-ridden, but he lived it in real life. Like, he didn't just say these things on television. We go up to a toll booth, and the lady would say, "How are you doing?" I go, "Honey, if I was doing any better, I'd have to be twins just to handle it." I mean, this is a walking, he's like a walking, talking cartoon character.
It was his car that he drove, Honky Tonk Man.
Oh yeah, that's
Greg
how he got
Valentine
the spot in WrestleMania, because he had the, the pink Cadillac. Who drives a pink Cadillac? But,
only DDP.
Only DDP. But Abdullah the Butcher sees Dallas and he goes, "He's going to make it, champ." Abdullah's got a really high voice. I said, "Dallas? He's going to make it?" He goes, "He lives the gimmick, champ. He lives the gimmick." So he is a gimmick, but he lives it. That's him. And when he turns that attention to the, for the DDP yoga, he has tapped into something that is almost like the fountain of youth in wrestling. Like,
because Chris Jericho's been
Jericho
using it,
swears by it, and he told me, he said, honestly, he said, I knew Paige for a long time, but it wasn't like we were tight. It wasn't until after I got out of wrestling and I got. He was injured, doing Dancing with the Stars, which is very difficult. People ask me, "How about you on Dancing with the Stars?" Like, I would embarrass the business. I don't want to be put in a position where I make the business look bad.
I saw you dance on stage.
Oh, that's yeah.
I mean, I don't want to give this away for people who.
But the dancing on stage has become a highlight, and some people will say it's the best part of the show, and I won't disagree with them. It's pretty good. But I couldn't do the rumba and all those different types of things. Should I answer that question about the rumble?
Yeah, go for it.
You know what? I was torn emotionally, because everyone wants to be able to say their last match was a great match, and I had the comfort of knowing that if I never wrestled again, the match I had with Ric Flair in October of 2010. Yeah. Was a really, really good match. Like, likely the best. I'm not going to have a better match than that. It's not likely that I will. But at the same time, I realized that if I'm going back to WWE, there's going to be that occasion, like the chance of getting out of this, this time period, however long it turns out to be, without doing a match. It's probably not going to happen. Probably somewhere along the line, it's going to happen. So I wrote an email and just said, "Look, no one man can ruin the Royal Rumble." Like,
you and Santino, we were talking about this, the episode of the Slam immediately after it. I mean, the fact that Brendan was in, and myself and Brendan and Rob McNichol, who works for The Sun, we're all big Foley marks, so we were very, very happy. And to see you and Santino doing the kind of dueling puppets.
It was good. When I got to the back, a bunch of the wrestlers gave me the standing O, and usually when I got the standing ovation, it meant that I was about to have emergency surgery done. That they had someone to stitch me up and I'd be burned or whatever. And this time I got back and they were giving me the standing O, and it wasn't until I watched it back the next day that I was like, that was really good. Like, not only the stuff with Santino, but the stuff with Ricardo. I guess I eliminated 3 guys, and the truth is that probably is how I should be used now. And the storyline that led into the appearance was that my younger kids are huge WWE fans. They hadn't seen me in WWE in 4 years. At that point, they didn't care. There's a funny story in one of my books when I went out to wrestle for the first time in front of them, and I see my kids, and my 6-year-old was booing me with the thumb. Boo. Which was wonderful, but when it was all said and done, Santino and I had an image for the ages, the Sacco and the Cobra. It was a pretty good use of my my limited talents these days, and it was fun, and it was something I'm glad I did.
Yeah, I think as well, there was a point when you came out where the crowd did really pop for it.
They did, yeah, and they looked past how uncomfortable it is to see me trying to run out to the ring. And here's the thing, behind the curtain, I'm like, I don't want to run, but if I don't run, I might not even get there by the time the next guy's music hits. And nothing would be worse than, you know, all of a sudden here Foley hits the ring, and all of a sudden they're counting 10, 9, next guy's coming out. So I didn't know. So I decided to run, and there
was a definite determination on your face.
Determination to get out there, and I did. I enjoyed myself.
Yeah,
so.
we're all very pleased to see that.
Thank you.
I think it was the right balance this year, the Rumble, with the humour and, then the drama at the end.
It is. They do an amazing job, and I think our universe, they're not fans. They're WWE Universe. They really come to trust that they're going to get a great show on the Rumble. I think there's WrestleMania, and then in people's minds, the Royal Rumble is a must-see. And then after that, it largely depends on how good the build-up to the matches are. You know, for things like SummerSlam, and then the other ones that are not as well known have to have major builds. But WrestleMania and the Royal Rumble, I think we've earned the trust of the universe in that they're gonna tune in to see what kind of journey we can take them on.
No, absolutely. I've got some more Royal Rumble and WrestleMania-based questions for you from Twitter. We will ask Mick those questions in a couple of minutes after these messages. See you in a sec. Hello, today is indeed a very, very nice day. My name is Jim Smallman, you're watching The Slam, this is part 3. In the studio is Mick Foley, the hardcore legend himself, a man who I will never get tired of talking to.
This is flying by, right?
This is flying by unbelievably quickly. So what we're going to do is we're going to do some quick one-word answers to some of the questions that you guys have posed us on Twitter for Mick. So,
closing my eyes to concentrate.
Okay, good. First question will be this. Did you watch Tough Enough when it was on?
Some of it.
Some of it.
Is that
that's a perfectly acceptable answer.
Yes, I did watch Tough Enough.
Rhea O'Reilly, who's a female wrestler who comes in the show sometimes, based in London, she wants to know your favourite current roller coaster.
Oh, man. The Phoenix at Knoebels Grove in Elysburg, Pennsylvania.
Nice.
Yeah.
There's a lot of roller coasters in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, great roller coasters. And this park, for the people who love the parks, what's great about it is it's been run by the same family for almost 90 years. I gave a little talk on the 25th anniversary of the Phoenix being moved from another park to their park, which really made it more than just a local. It was the ride that put them on the map. And I said that, you know, the Walt Disney Company's been able to take that one plan at Disneyland in California and kind of duplicate it in 6 or 7 different places, which is wonderful, but that no amount of money could ever duplicate this place. It was just like one of a kind. So Knoebels Grove, Elysburg, Pennsylvania.
Excellent stuff. Who is your favourite person to work with in the WWE at the moment, if you had to work with someone?
Oh, man. If I had to?
Yeah, if you had to work with someone in the WWE, who would you want to work with the most?
Like for a dream match, or?
Yeah, just like, let's say for a dream match, right now.
Dream match. Ziggler.
Ziggler? Ooh.
I don't think I'll ever get to where I can physically.
I think you could do what you did with Edge, though, with Ziggler, and that whole, you know, really.
But unfortunately, it's not 2006 anymore.
So. Is there anything that you ever look at and think other wrestlers doing and think, thank God I didn't do that?
Yes, anything remotely athletic. More so. I look at the guys with the spray tans and think, thank God I didn't do that.
Nothing wrong with being pasty.
Nothing. They have to have a contrast, right? Look at Sheamus, right? It works for him because everyone else is orange. I mean, and I like The Miz, and I really want to thank him personally. He retweeted my thing about the Reign campaign, which is a big surprise. But with that being said, and with the fact that I think he's a really great character and a very good wrestler being said, he looked like a pumpkin at the Royal Rumble. Thank God I never went that route of the spray tan. Oh.
One more quick question, and this is from me. If another wrestler was to write, if you could pick any other wrestler to write their autobiography and actually write it themselves, not ghostwrite it, do what you did, write it themselves, who would you most want to read their autobiography of? Let
me think. Punk. I think Punk would have a really good story to tell. Yeah.
Because I remember you telling me a really good story about Punk because you know I'm a big CM Punk fan.
Yeah.
And we were gigging together in Nottingham, and you told me about when he won the title at Money in the Bank. Because didn't you text him and you expected him to?
Yeah, he won the world. Yeah, he won the WWE Championship. Or I confuse them. And I sent out a text. I was on the road, gigging, as you guys say.
Yeah.
And congratulations. And like 5 minutes later, I got an answer from Punk, and I was like, "Am I still that relevant that I get a text back from the WWE champion?"
But you must find this. I mean, if you walk into a locker room at a WWE show now, you must find there's people who you've never worked with who must really look up to you.
You know what? It's very nice. People are very respectful. And I know some people rag on me for being a vocal Cena supporter, but I said something, even though, granted, it was a terrible television segment by design when I went out and did my return to WWE and the This Is Your Life segment. What I said to him was true, that, that my relationship with John was not so much as being a friend, but it was based on two writings. One was a letter, and then one was the stuff I said about Twitter, where I stood up for him and just got the avalanche. I couldn't believe it. I put, hey, I think it's about time people started recognizing John Cena's legacy of great matches. And I sent it out, and I look over at my daughter, and I went, I just got 687 messages. I said, you just sent that out a minute ago.
Well, it does take two people to make a match. I mean, if you look at the fact that Dave Meltzer rated the Punk Cena match the first 5-star match in WWE in a long time.
Yeah,
and it takes two people to
make
a match.
With all due respect to Punk, you don't have that great match without a guy in there doing his share. But the other letter I thought was equally or more important was I wrote him a letter. I didn't know him that well, but I'm pretty observant, and that helps in comedy and in wrestling. And I would see the way he treated people, and he treated everybody with respect, whether they were the top guy on the card or the guy starting out. And hopefully that's how people saw me. I wasn't necessarily friends with everybody, but I think I treated people pretty good. And in the case of a guy like Punk, it's nice that that's remembered. A lot of the guys, like he remembers me not only. Putting a good word in for him, but treating him really good from the time I met him, and now he's way up here, and I think he remembers that.
Yeah, we have a guest on our Skype wall. We have Sean. Hello, Sean. How are you, mate?
I'm all right, Jim. How are you? All right.
I'm good, thank you. Now, you're a Liverpool fan, so obviously you're already quite happy because you won the cup final yesterday, and now you get to speak to Mr. Mick Foley.
Yeah, that was a wonderful game, and I saw all but the last part of it.
You missed the penalty shootout.
Yeah. I think we were waiting for the last part of it yesterday. I even sat in that studio just waiting for it to happen. At the end now.
Now, have you got a question for Mick, Sean?
I do indeed. I wanted to say thank you for him first, because Have a Nice Day was the first autobiography I ever read, and it was brilliant.
Thank you very much.
That's my life. And of course, you've always been very creative, writing comedy, everything else, and during the early 90s and mid-90s with the pieces you did for ECW and WWF, WWE. Would you say that you're one of the big causes for almost deconstructing the character of professional wrestlers, as in being able to say you can swap to one to the other, I'm really just this person, and things like that? How much did you think that you benefited or contributed to it?
To deconstructing a character in the sense that I played more than one character, or?
Played more than one and sort of obviously said, look, I'm more than one character. This can change. This can happen. I don't just have.
Well, first of all, I want to say I didn't play a character. I became the character. Except when it was Dude Love. Then it was just like, okay, I'm a 300-pound guy who can't dance, and I'm dancing. You know what? I mean, I wasn't the first guy by any means to really put a lot of thought into their character. I think if there's one thing that's missing, and I'm not somebody who derides the newer generation, but one thing we had to do to keep our head above water was to constantly be thinking about the character, constantly tweaking it, constantly staying like one step ahead of the public's need for change. And you saw the guys, I think, in the Attitude Era who were willing to, to settle and were willing to stick to a catchphrase, and who rode that train a little too long. You saw them kind of get swept by the wayside. And then there was ultimately a time when people needed more than just the catchphrases. And then the guys who were able to capitalize on that were the ones who had more depth of character. So it's really a challenge to stay on top. It's a challenge to do stuff that's meaningful enough and different enough to get you there. But then once you get to the top, or in my case, near the top, you know, staying up there requires a lot of thought. And so I wasn't the first guy. I'm not the last guy. But I think you see the difference in a guy like Punk, in that he can not only talk, but he makes you think. I mean, his stuff is really thought-provoking. So I thank you for the compliment, and I think I understand what you mean, but there have been guys who took their character, you know, very seriously and made people think and were changing things up well before I did it.
Sean, I have to ask you a quick question. Have you got a favourite Mick promo? Because I'm gonna ask Mick what his favourite promo is. Have you got a favourite one yourself?
I watched the ECW Rise and Fall DVD last night randomly when I got home, and the promo that you did with Mikey when you run the tag team titles, and you just got Mikey saying he loves it, he really likes it. I love that because you're so enthusiastic, and Mikey's just there like, oh no,
I'm gonna get killed.
My favourite one's also from the ECW era. It's the one you did with where you're talking to a chair and you don't know you're talking to a chair, and it's full of euphemisms and sexual innuendo.
Yeah.
It's so good.
Yeah, no one has ever brought that up to me again, and I don't know if I've ever seen that. I think one of the good things, I don't sit and watch my own stuff very often. And there's not that many things that really, I mean, I don't watch my own stuff and go, oh, that was great. But just last night, somebody had tweeted a link out where it was the interviews I'd done with JR in 1997.
Oh, I remember watching those.
And I watched that, and I was like, wow, I was, you know, getting goosebumps on my own stuff. So those were some of that series of interviews. Actually, one interview caught up. That was one of the best ones I've ever done.
Yeah.
There was one I did alone with in a rocking chair for the build-up with Randy Orton.
Yeah,
that I really liked. There was the Kane Dewey promo back in the days when I was angry and frustrated. I would take that out in a wrestling interview instead of on Twitter, which carries its own problems along with it.
No, which makes sense. Sean, we're going to have to let you go, mate. But thank you very much for your question. It's a tremendous question as well.
Yeah, good question. Good work.
We will speak to you soon. Thank you very much, Sean.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
Cheers, mate.
Okay.
That was Sean on our Twitter wall. We're going to go for one final little break. When we come back, we're going to talk all about Mick's Wrestlemania raffle and try and Sean in a few more questions as well. We'll see you in 2. Hello, welcome back to the final part of this week's edition of The Slam. It is a very special Mick Foley special because the hardcore legend himself has joined us in the studio, possibly the quickest hour of my life. It is
flown.
It's been over far too quickly. Couple of quick questions before we talk about your amazing WrestleMania raffle.
Oh, thanks.
Which is amazing, and I know because I've entered it, and I'm really hoping that in some way my association with you will make it fixed. Firstly,
it's not fixed.
No, comedy related. Who are your comedy heroes, if you have to name any?
Oh, going from when I was younger, George Carlin, and with Class Clown being the funniest thing I'd ever heard. My brother and I were listening to that well before we should have. We saw it in my older cousin's collection and just laughed till we cried. And then I loved Steve Martin stuff, and didn't fully appreciate what it was about it that I loved until I read his book, Born Standing Up. But I really respect that, and I think it made an impact I didn't even realize, that sense that I would go out there sometimes in wrestling and bomb intentionally, you know, to maybe, not in the ring, I didn't want to have the bad, I didn't do the Owen Hart, let me have a bad match on purpose so I can make the other boys laugh, which is a skill, just a unique skill he had. But the idea of going out there and cutting a promo just to make Chris Jericho laugh and to make Blackjack Lanza throw down his cigarette and say, what is he doing out there? So those are a couple of my, my favorites. And then as I learn more about comedy, you know, I look at some of the guys that I've been lucky enough to work with, whether it's Judah Friedlander, Bill Burr in the U.S., or you and Brendan.
Oh,
you know,
bless you, sir.
Stuff is,
so my head will not actually be able to get out of the door now. That's the...
And the Brooker man, of course.
Yeah, of course, Chris Brooker is sitting beyond the camera, but we can say hello to. Hi, Chris. Hi. There we go. we're going to get on to WrestleMania, so obviously we can talk about the raffle.
Sure.
Would you... First, I'm not going to ask if you are going to be involved in WrestleMania, but would you like to be involved in WrestleMania?
I would like to be involved in WrestleMania, in the show. I would rather not have a match. You know, I mean, I think they've got the spotlight on 4 matches now. And then there are other guys in this case who really do deserve the chance to be on that stage. I mean, I got my thing at the Royal Rumble, and I don't think there's a possibility of building up something quick enough to be important enough to be on that show. But I've got a couple ideas where I could fit in, and I'm going to suggest them via email. In the same way that I said no one man can ruin the Royal Rumble, I'll try to eloquently state why I should do something on the show.
Well, a lot of people on Twitter messaging me saying that you'd be a good choice for special guest referee for Triple H Taker.
Maybe. What I would like to do, I'd like to be a guest I'd like to go back to the announce desk, and I'd like to provide commentary for that match.
Yeah.
You know, I know a lot of people said, "Oh, you're spoiling it," when I said it would be an honor to be part of the Undertaker's last match. I don't know it's his last match. I haven't heard him say it's his last match. I haven't heard anybody else say it's his last match. I'm just guessing that if you know, he leaves 20-0 or even 19-1, that I'm guessing there's a possibility that it is. And as a guy who loves not only WWE history and wrestling history, but who personally appreciates what Wrestling the Undertaker did for me, you know, I'd like to be part of that in a way.
Absolutely.
And I think I could lend more as a commentator to that match than I could as a referee, honestly.
Yeah. Also, refereeing's hard on the knees, isn't it?
Well, you know, that's not the type of match you'd be up and down doing all these counts. But I don't know. I don't get the same sense that I would add dramatically as a referee. But I do think I would add as a commentator.
Well, fingers crossed, because I'd love to hear that. Yeah. Now we're going to talk about your raffle.
All right.
Now you're doing this for a very, very good cause. We've got the graphic up on screen there, but you're doing that for an incredibly good cause, aren't you?
Yeah, and I'll say that, you know, RAIN is like the most pleasant sounding acronym. And I had a friend, and this is not, you know, meant to be a funny story at all, but a friend of mine who I'd known a long time, and she said, "Oh, you volunteer in this group RAIN? What is that?" And I said, "Well, it stands for," and here's a Rape, Abuse, Incest National Network. And before I could even get the 5 words out, she had tears streaming down her face. And then about an hour later, she said, "In case you couldn't tell, you know, I could tell." So these issues that RAIN deals with, they're the largest anti-sexual assault organization in the U.S., and I hope that doesn't put people in the U.K. off from being part of it. They do invaluable work. I'm an online volunteer on a weekly basis, so I see the need that's out there. And despite the fact that they do a lot of work and they have a large footprint, it's a very small organization with a very small budget. And so we have a chance with this raffle to really make a very good contribution. And I think by getting the issue out in the open, we do a lot towards preventing it in the future. Sure. Because I just went, we just had a wonderful visit to the Great Ormond Street Children's Hospital today. And a lot of guys are involved, like John Cena being the primary guy who's had so many wishes. And we are firmly behind groups that, you know, fight childhood cancer and granting kids wishes. And I'm part of the Muscular Dystrophy Association. But in a lot of those cases, you say this stuff is so tragic and maybe over time it will be preventable. Whereas in this case, you know, 100% of these are preventable. So a lot of it's just education and a willingness to talk about issues that are difficult, and that's part of what RAIN does. I mean, crisis intervention, education, prevention. But you've put it in with this, and not just this, but you've been backing them for a long time now, haven't you? Yeah. I've been a volunteer, actively volunteering for 2 years. I've been a pretty big donor. The last book, I know I'm rumored to be really thrifty, but I donated all the proceeds to 2 groups that work with sexual violence, RAIN in the United States and a group called Child Fund International. So that was able to fund over 200 scholarships for children of rape, and parents, microloans for the moms. What makes this, I think, really work is that the issues are really difficult. They're not often talked about, but by making it part of something really cool like WrestleMania, it kind of creates all these tiny, mini little conversations where even if people aren't actively talking about it, at least they're seeing that name.
Yeah.
And if they're tweeting it or retweeting it, people say, how can I help? Or I'm short on money. I say, just get the word out, you know, tell people about this. And I'm so glad that some of the wrestlers have been retweeting it. Even, you know, like I said, even The Miz has been. And essentially what the raffle does is it takes an auction item, you know, that might go for $15,000 or $20,000 and makes it possible for almost everybody. It's $10 US, and I guess about £7 to enter. And if people go to my site, which is realmickfoley.com/mania, when they click on and they see the grand prize,
I'm going to say, tell us what it is, because it is we've only got about a minute left.
Okay, yeah, I mean, here it is.
Blitz through.
It's round-trip airfare from anywhere in the world, up to $3,000 for 2 tickets. So people from the UK, especially because of the relaxed visas for vacations, please enter. It is for you guys. 3 nights hotel and a 4-star luxury hotel in downtown Miami. 2 very good tickets to WrestleMania. 2 tickets to the Hall of Fame. 2 tickets to Access. Lunch with Eve Torres, the Bella Twins, and one diva to be named later. Breakfast with me, $500 spending cash, and to top it all off, you get to have a cup of coffee with David Otunga,
which is the man who drinks from the biggest coffee flask.
And I believe, I don't have, it's not confirmed yet, but rumors, sources tell me that he is bringing the thermos.
Give our viewers the address again, because obviously we want people to.
It's Real Mick Foley, and it's not MC. Mick is my first name. realmickfoley.com/mania.
Cool. Now, before we let you go, you're off to Cardiff tonight, which is Monday, and then you've still got gigs coming up.
We got Birmingham
on Tuesday,
Sheffield, Liverpool, Dublin, and Belfast, and the only 2 cities that have tickets left are Liverpool, where Robbie Fowler is going to be our guest of honor, and I'm sure they'll be really thrilled that I walked out of Wembley, thinking the game was over.
And there's tickets left for Dublin as well, isn't there?
Yeah, and tickets left for Dublin. Yeah. And they can find those at realmickfoley.com. So one-stop shopping. You can enter the raffle. You can buy tickets with one website.
And I know I've been biased because I've done a couple of sport dates, and I'm doing Birmingham as well on Tuesday. But if you get a chance, to see Mick, either this tour or any subsequent tour, do go and see him, because he is tremendous, and some of the stories you hear will be just thrill you. Mick, thank you very much for coming in and making this the quickest hour of television.
There's no way that was an hour.
Apparently it was. But thank you so much, sir. And
usually we lean over and shake hands, but this is the widest separation.
It is. We'll just sort of. I'll tell you what I'll do before for us to end. I'll walk over and we'll compare my tattoo to your face, and that's how we'll end. Look, there we go. Mick Foley and my face. That is it, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for watching The Slam. We will see you next week, my friends. Thank you very much.
Stay ahead of the game with Sports Tonight Live. Don't miss a thing. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Search for Sports Tonight Live on Facebook and like our fan page. Follow Sports Tonight TV on Twitter and tweet us your thoughts and opinions. Sports Tonight Live, it's the platform for the fans.